The year was 2020. The world was a different place, marked by uncertainty and a pervasive sense of unease. For many of us, including myself, the pandemic forced a pivot, a scramble for survival. I found myself behind the wheel, navigating the labyrinthine streets as an Uber driver. It was a means to an end, a way to stitch together a livelihood after my retail job vanished into thin air. Little did I know, this seemingly mundane job would plunge me into a series of encounters that would redefine my understanding of fear and the shadowy underbelly of human nature. Ride-sharing, you see, offers a unique window into society. You meet every conceivable type of person, especially when you're working those late-night shifts. There were the usual suspects, the awkward silences, the boisterous drunk passengers, the bizarre, meandering conversations that faded into the night. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what unfolded on a crisp Friday night in October. The air itself seemed to crackle with an unspoken tension, a prelude to the unsettling events that were about to transpire. It was just past midnight. I'd just finished a drop-off at a hotel on the quiet fringes of town when my phone buzzed, almost instantly, with a new ride request. The pickup location was a mere 6 minutes away, a bowling alley nestled within a strip mall, a perfectly ordinary setting for a late-night fare. The name on the screen read Derek. I accepted, a sense of routine washing over me. As I approached, the area was eerily still. Only a few scattered parking lot lights cast long, dancing shadows. No other cars were around, and the bowling alley appeared deserted. But there he was, standing alone beneath one of those solitary lights, a tall figure, perhaps 6 feet 2 inches, cloaked in a gray hoodie and jeans, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his head bowed as if fixated on his shoes. I pulled up, and he finally lifted his gaze to meet mine. There was no wave, no acknowledgement, just that unsettling stare. I rolled down my window, the cool night air seeping in, and asked, "You Derek?" He responded with a slow, deliberate nod, then moved with an almost unnatural quietness to the back seat, settling in behind me. I initiated the trip, asking if the destination, a residential neighborhood about 20 minutes away that I'd never ventured into, was correct. "Yeah, that's right," he replied, his voice a flat, unnerving monotone. It wasn't slurred from drink or slurred from drugs, it was simply devoid of any discernible emotion. I remember a fleeting thought, something's off. But at that moment, I dismissed it, eager to get the ride over with. Continue to expand on the unsettling silence, his fixed gaze, and the increasing discomfort of the driver. Describe the feeling of being watched, the growing unease, and the isolated nature of the destination. Elaborate on the "pull into that driveway" request, the abandoned house, and the driver's internal monologue about ending the trip. The next few minutes crawled by in an agonizing silence. I'd steal glances at him in my rearview mirror, and each time, he was staring straight ahead, not at his phone, not out the window, but directly at the back of my head. It was an unnerving, palpable weight. I tried to puncture the heavy quiet, asking, "How's your night going?" He paused, then his voice, still unsettlingly calm, echoed through the car, "Just needed to get out of there." My curiosity, and frankly, my concern, led me to ask, "Out of where?" His response was curt, almost dismissive, "Doesn't matter." I didn't press. Some passengers prefer silence, I told myself, but this felt different. This felt, deliberately unsettling. We drove on, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the engine and the growing thud of my own heartbeat. Around 15 minutes into the journey, a new unsettling realization dawned on me: we were heading into an incredibly isolated part of town. There were no streetlights, sprawling yards, and a dense canopy of trees that seemed to swallow the dim light of my headlights. As we neared the destination, he suddenly leaned forward, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Actually, can you pull into that driveway right there?" He gestured towards a house on the right. The house was a skeletal silhouette against the sparse light, completely dark, no interior or exterior lights. It looked, to be brutally honest, abandoned. The lawn was wildly overgrown, paint peeled from its siding like decaying skin, and there wasn't a single car in the driveway. "Is this your place?" I asked, a tremor in my voice I hoped he didn't detect. His reply was terse, "Just pull in." I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to drive away, but I complied, turning into the dark maw of the driveway. I stopped near the front of the house and put the car in park. He made no move to exit. I turned to look at him. "Everything all right?" He ignored me, his gaze fixed on the front door of the desolate house. "Wait here," he said, then, without another word, he opened the door and began to walk towards the house. He didn't approach the front door, though. Instead, he vanished around the side of the building, swallowed by the darkness. I sat there, my mind racing, for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 minutes. The ride was technically still active. I didn't want to risk a penalty for abandoning a passenger, but a cold dread was creeping up my spine. My gut screamed that this wasn't a simple case of him needing to grab something. Finally, my instincts overrode my adherence to procedure. I manually ended the trip, marked it as complete, and began to back out of the driveway. But before I could shift into reverse, I saw him. He was walking back towards the car, fast. His hands were empty, and his face was contorted into an expression I couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of anger, perhaps, or a strange, manic excitement. I unlocked the doors. I didn't want a confrontation, but every fiber of my being screamed at me not to let him back in. He opened the rear door, slid in, and his voice, though still flat, had an undeniable urgency now. "Take me to the other place." "What other place?" I managed to stammer. "Just drive." "I'll tell you," he insisted. "You need to put it in the app," I countered, my voice firmer than I felt. He didn't respond. He just stared at me in the mirror, his eyes unblinking. I repeated myself, "I can't take you anywhere unless you put it in the app." After a few agonizing seconds, he finally broke the silence. "Drive me back to where you picked me up." I was done arguing. I just wanted him out of my car. I turned the car around and started heading back towards the strip mall. The return journey was suffocating. He didn't speak, but his presence filled the car, a tangible weight of unseen eyes. I could feel him watching me, the hairs on my arms prickling. He was still staring at the back of my head, a phantom presence in my rearview mirror. At one point, I attempted a futile attempt to lighten the oppressive mood. "Rough night?" I offered, a weak smile on my face. "You could say that," he replied, his voice still devoid of any warmth. "Everything all right?" I pushed, against my better judgment. "Not yet," he said, and I knew then that I wouldn't ask any more questions. When we finally pulled back into the strip mall, I parked under the same solitary light where this whole unsettling journey began. Before I could even utter a word, he leaned forward, his voice a low, chilling whisper that burrowed into my very soul. "You ever wonder how you're going to die?" I froze. A nervous, awkward laugh escaped me. "Not really something I think about," I mumbled, trying to dismiss the horrific nature of the question. He didn't laugh. He simply leaned back into his seat, and after a few interminable seconds, he said, "I think about it all the time." Then, as abruptly as he had appeared, he opened the door and stepped out, vanishing into the darkness behind the bowling alley without another word. He didn't even close the door right away. He stood there for a beat, half in, half out, then his eyes met mine one last time. "You picked the wrong guy up tonight." He finally shut the door, the sound echoing ominously in the silent night. I sat there for a full minute, too shaken to move, the words replaying in my mind like a broken record. Eventually, I managed to drive myself home, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, convinced he might reappear. When I finally reached the perceived safety of my home, I immediately pulled up the trip details. My blood ran cold. The name had changed. It no longer said Derek. The field was blank. No name, no profile picture, no trip history. It was as if the ride, the entire terrifying encounter, had never happened. I contacted Uber support, desperate for an explanation, but they claimed the trip data was unavailable, citing a potential app crash or rider cancellation. But I knew what I saw. I knew that man got into my car. I knew he said what he said. "You picked the wrong guy up tonight." I've never seen him again, and I pray I never do. But every time I get a ping in a dimly lit parking lot, every time a silent passenger settles into my back seat, I'm transported back to that night. The chilling sensation of impending doom, the terrifying question of what he truly meant, and the lingering uncertainty, did he simply change his mind at the last second? Or was he never planning anything, just indulging a cruel desire to instill fear? And the most haunting question of all, did he ever find the right car? The following year, 2021, found me still in the thick of it, driving for Uber full-time. My city, a magnet for tourists, especially in the bustling summer months, offered a steady stream of rides. Night shifts were my preferred domain. I'm a natural night owl, and the reduced traffic coupled with the often generous tips from late-night revelers made it a lucrative endeavor. This particular Saturday night was no different. It was around 1:30 a.m., a typical weekend crowd. I just dropped off a particularly boisterous group of college kids, so the next request, bearing the name Chris and a pickup location on a small side street just off downtown, was a welcome relief. The pin, however, was in an odd spot, not near any bars or apartments, but rather tucked away near the back lot of an old strip mall. I shrugged it off, attributing it to a common GPS glitch. I pulled up and spotted him, a solitary figure at the corner, hoodie up, jeans, eyes glued to his phone. "Chris?" I asked. He merely nodded and slid into the back seat, remarkably quiet. No scent of alcohol, no slurred words. He seemed sober, just uncommunicative. He didn't offer a greeting, nor did he respond when I inquired about his night. Some people just aren't talkers, I reasoned, dismissing the subtle prickle of unease. I started the ride, the destination a 25-minute drive to the opposite side of town, a suburban neighborhood I'd only visited once or twice before. The darkness out there was profound. Some areas were devoid of streetlights, isolating us in a tunnel of my headlights. "My parents," he replied. "Do you live there?" I pressed. "Not anymore." That simple phrase sent a fresh wave of chills down my neck. Against every screaming instinct, I slowly started driving back to where I had picked him up. As we neared the house again, his breathing became more labored. He began to rock slightly in the back seat, a low, guttural whisper escaping him at one point, "They're still there. They won't leave no matter what I do." When we finally pulled up to the house, it was still enveloped in darkness, still no sign of life. He got out without a word, walked up to the front door, and simply stood there. He didn't knock, didn't try the handle. He just stood motionless, facing the dark entrance. I waited about 30 seconds, then pulled away again, making absolutely sure the doors were locked this time. I drove 3 blocks, parked under a solitary streetlight, and sat there for 10 long minutes, trying to process the surreal nightmare I had just experienced. I debated calling the police, but what would I even say? That a man got into my car twice and spoke in riddles. There was no crime, technically, as far as I knew. So, I drove home, and sleep was a distant luxury that night. The next day, I reported the ride to Uber, and honestly, I regretted not involving the police more directly. This man might have been severely ill, in desperate need of help. Who knows if that desolate house was truly his parents' house, or if he was simply in the throes of a manic episode. The chilling uncertainty of it all still haunts me. As an 18-year-old living alone in my apartment with my dog, getting food delivered, especially living 8 miles out of town, could sometimes be a hassle. You hear stories about bad delivery experiences, but you never truly believe they'll happen to you. At least, that's what I thought. It was a Friday evening. My apartment was in a state of meticulous order. I was preparing for my boyfriend's weekend visit. Long-distance relationships mean you cherish those precious weekend hours, so I always tried to have everything spotless before his Saturday arrival. I'd been cleaning for about 2 hours, and by 6 p.m., my stomach was rumbling. The thought of dirtying freshly cleaned dishes in my sparkling kitchen was abhorrent. So, I made the logical choice: Uber Eats. I placed my order and received the familiar notification: my driver was en route, behind the wheel of a white Honda Fit Sport. Being a young woman living by myself, my delivery instructions were always set to contactless: leave the food at my door. I was curled up in my living room, engrossed in a TV show, when the "food delivered" notification popped up. I sprang up, a wave of hunger propelling me towards the door. But when I opened it, the food wasn't there. I scanned the other doors, thinking maybe he'd made a mistake, but nothing. I stepped back inside, intending to message the driver, when a soft knock sounded at my door. It was my next-door neighbor, holding my food. "Hey, sorry," he said, a slight frown on his face. "I picked up your food from your delivery driver. He was looking through your windows, and I wasn't sure what he was doing." I took the food, thanking him, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. What the hell just happened? I went back inside, ate my meal, and tried to lose myself in a movie. Later, as I began my nightly ritual of getting ready for bed, a shower, then a quick check of the TV and all the locks, I laid down, called my boyfriend, and eventually drifted off to sleep. I woke a few times during the night to my dog growling, a low, guttural sound, directed at the window or the back door. My dog isn't a large, imposing guard dog. He's a small, 5-pound Pomeranian mix, but his growls, unexpected in the dark, were genuinely unsettling. I managed to calm him down, coaxing him back to sleep. Not even 15 minutes later, I was jolted awake by a loud, insistent banging on my window. My dog, now fully alert, erupted into a frenzy of barking, growling, and even whimpering. I was paralyzed, frozen in my bed. I pulled the sheets over my head, leaving just enough space to peek at the window. I fumbled for my phone and called the police, whispering urgently into the receiver. I explained to the operator that someone was in my backyard, and terrifyingly, my window didn't lock, making it easily liftable. She instructed me to move to another room and assured me that officers would arrive shortly. I ran to my kitchen, grabbing the largest knife I could find, and waited, straining for the sight of blue and red flashing lights or the wail of sirens. It felt like an eternity. I peered out my kitchen window and saw something I never, ever expected: the Uber driver's car, the white Honda Fit Sport, sitting across the street in a large, open field used for parking trailers and dog walking. No one was in the car. It clicked into place with horrifying clarity: he was in my backyard. Finally, the police arrived. I was shaking, tears streaming down my face, barely able to speak. I stammered out my story to one officer while another went to check my backyard, the location of my bedroom window. A third officer, who had just arrived, went to investigate the car in the field. The two officers returned, their voices low as they spoke to the officer I was with. "Footprints in the backyard," I heard one say. It had rained the night before, making the ground muddy. Panic surged through me. Not only was this terrifying news, but if he wasn't in his car and the police hadn't brought him back arrested, where was he? My neighbor, hearing the commotion, came outside to see what was happening. The officers explained the situation, and he then recounted how he had picked up my food earlier that day because the driver was acting suspiciously. My neighbor, in a surprising act of kindness, offered for me to stay at his apartment for the night. Oddly, I declined. When the police finally left, I went back inside my apartment, thinking the ordeal was over. It took hours for me to feel comfortable enough to even attempt sleep. But at 2 a.m., I was woken by a loud banging on my front door. "Police," a voice called out. No way this is happening right now, I thought, my heart sinking. I crept to the front door, terrified to open it. It was the female officer I had spoken to earlier. She explained that they had stayed hidden near my apartment, waiting to see if the man would return. And he did. They caught him walking up to my front door, clearly attempting to find a way in. My heart plummeted to my stomach. She then informed me that he had been arrested and I no longer had to worry about him. I thanked her, the relief almost overwhelming, and went back to bed. But sleep wouldn't come again that night. And to this day, I never use Uber Eats when I'm home alone. I was 26 at the time, on a much-anticipated vacation to Washington, D.C., visiting my then-fiancée, Sarah. She was celebrating her basic training graduation, a monumental occasion for her family, and she wanted me there to share it. So, I booked a flight, arriving a week early to have some precious time alone with her before the family whirlwind descended. She stayed with me at my hotel, and eventually, we decided to explore some of DC's iconic historical sites. As a first-timer, the idea captivated me. We spent 4 exhilarating hours walking, soaking in the grandeur of the Lincoln Memorial, the towering presence of the Washington Monument, the stately Congress building, and even the distant silhouette of the White House. It was an experience I'd missed out on during a high school trip, and seeing these places firsthand was truly something special. Sarah, bless her, seemed to genuinely appreciate my enthusiasm, and we reveled in each other's company. Finally, our feet aching and our minds buzzing with historical facts, we decided it was time to head back to the hotel. We'd used the Uber app to get there, so we simply opted for it again for the return journey. Sarah made the request on her phone while I gratefully sank onto a shaded bench, my body craving a long, overdue nap. After about 10 minutes, a car pulled up alongside the curb. Sarah gestured, indicating it was our ride, as the spot it stopped in was certainly not a designated parking area. I pushed myself up and followed her to the car, a gray minivan. She opened the back door and stepped inside, asking the driver, "Uber for Sarah?" He responded with a slight nod, no words. I followed her in, shutting the door behind me. Looking back, the sheer stupidity of our actions is glaring. We should have asked for the driver's name, verified the car's make and model against the app. But in that moment, tired and trusting, it simply didn't cross my mind. The request was on Sarah's phone, and I blindly followed her lead. As we settled into the back of the minivan, the silence from the driver was immediately noticeable. Every other Uber driver I'd ever had, at the very least, offered a greeting or confirmed my name. This man, nothing. He simply started driving, acknowledging neither of us beyond that initial, unsettling nod. I registered the oddity but was too weary to engage. I leaned my head back, closed my eyes, and hoped for a swift journey. Only 5 minutes later, I felt a gentle tap on my arm. Sarah. I opened my eyes and looked at her. She didn't speak, but the worry etched on her face was undeniable. What was wrong? She pointed to her phone, which displayed the planned Uber route back to our hotel. It took only a second for me to realize, we were going in the exact opposite direction. My heart sank, a cold dread seeping into my veins, as a notification popped up on her phone, "Your Uber has arrived," followed by a message from the actual driver asking where we were. The sickening realization hit me like a physical blow. How incredibly foolish we had been. The driver's picture on Sarah's app didn't match the man in front of us. We were in the wrong car. And this was no simple mistake. I slowly looked towards the driver, but I remained silent. What were this man's intentions? What was he capable of? I didn't want to find out. All I knew was that I had to get Sarah and myself out of that car, and fast. I leaned forward, my voice as calm as I could muster, "We've changed our minds. We'll be fine being let out here." My attempt was to avoid alarming him, to feign ignorance of our discovery. He glanced at me through the rearview mirror, his first real acknowledgement since we'd entered the vehicle. His stare lingered for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 seconds, his eyes unblinking, unreadable. He didn't stop the car. He didn't even utter a word in response. He just kept driving, as if I hadn't spoken at all. My patience evaporated. Whatever this man had planned, it wasn't good. In that split second, I did the only thing I could think of. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my pocket knife, and flipped open the blade. Without wasting another second, my voice firm and clear, I said, "I know you're not our Uber driver. I don't know what your plan is here, or what you think you're about to do to us, but I have a knife, and if you don't pull this car over right now, I have no problem using it." The driver's eyes darted to me in the rearview mirror, and I saw the flicker of recognition as his gaze fell on the knife clutched tightly in my hand. Without hesitation, he slammed on the brakes, pulling the minivan to the side of the road. I heard the satisfying click of the doors unlocking. Sarah and I wasted no time. We scrambled out of that car as fast as humanly possible. The moment we were both safely outside, the man floored it, speeding away into the distance. We stood there, shaking, gathering ourselves. Sarah was on the verge of a full-blown panic attack, and I was still trying to comprehend the sheer terror of what had just transpired. Sarah quickly pulled out her phone, messaged our actual Uber driver, explained our situation, and asked if he could pick us up from our new location. The real driver arrived within minutes, and this time, we meticulously verified his identity and the car. We recounted everything that had happened, and that's when he delivered the chilling revelation that made the blood in my veins run cold. He told us there had been multiple instances recently of people posing as Uber drivers in the area. It was an easy target, he explained, given the influx of tourists and out-of-towners who wouldn't think twice about hopping into what they believed was their rideshare. Apparently, many people had gone missing, and the worst was assumed. He looked at us, his eyes serious. "You two were lucky you noticed when you did, and you weren't too far from where you were picked up. That's probably the only reason he let you go, and of course, the fact that you were armed." We made it back to the hotel without further incident, and we immediately reported everything to the police. We provided the best description we could of the man and his minivan. The police assured us they'd contact us with any information. We never heard back from them. I can only assume the man was never caught or identified, and that thought still chills me. He could still be out there. This experience serves as a stark reminder, a desperate plea to anyone listening: always, always verify your Uber drivers. Always make sure you're aware of your surroundings. Your life could depend on it.